Hello and welcome to the qualifying edition of today's race weekend data analysis for the Styrian Grand Prix. The series in which we compile all of the qualifying data and especially pit each of the teammates against each other to see exactly how well they have performed against this whole season. Equally, we'll be going over the audience prediction championships, and it was a fairly low scoring round, quite surprisingly. So without further ado, let us jump on into the qualifying data for today's video. But we start with the audience prediction championships post-qualifying, and the leaderboards look like this. It is Arturo Salazar who takes the lead, joint with Min Verstappen scoring 11 out of 25. Evan Darcy once again is up at the top, scoring 10 out of 25. I said it was a slightly low scoring round. We then have some new entrants scoring 8 points. This is Monkey Boy and Schlank. We then have people like Mika Tukkonen, who's entered the past couple of races. I do hope I'm pronouncing that right. They did mention in the comments that I may not be. I'm not entirely sure how else I could pronounce it other than Mika Tukkonen, but I'll stick with that. We've then got Pablo on 7. Aaron from the 5 Red Lights channel is back once again, scoring 6, the same as myself. As also Hal, we are also equal on 6. Then the second half of the leaderboard, we had 57 overall entries to this championship. That is absolutely mega. We've got people like Scott Hilland, Torst, and then unfortunately all the way down at the bottom scoring just 3 points, we have Carrie Slaughter and Gear Down Aviation. Some really, really unlucky and unfortunate predictions. Now, if you would like to get involved in the Audience Prediction Championships, then make sure to check out the videos that I drop on Thursday before all of the practice sessions for a Grand Prix weekend. But with that all concluded, let us go through the qualifying data for today's video, and we just remind ourselves of that qualifying order, and we'll take a look through at Q1 first. Interestingly, it was Ocon who was knocked out, along with Nicholas Latifi, Raikkonen, and of course the 2 Haas cars, who were 6/10 off of the pace. They couldn't even break the 1-minute 5s. But definitely very, very disappointing for Esteban Ocon. Nicholas Latifi, interestingly, was up at P10, and then he just tumbled and tumbled and tumbled down that order. Then heading on into Q2, it was Sergio Perez who took his turn at the top of the leaderboard, with Verstappen slipping to P4 and Gasly up to P3, which was absolutely mega. But both AlphaTauris, with Tsunoda making it through as well, are through to Q3. Leclerc is through, Stroll is also through for the first time in a few races, with Russell missing out on Q3 by just 8 thousandths of a second. Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo and also Sebastian Vettel are unfortunately all knocked out of Q2. But interestingly, Yuki Tsunoda does have a 3-place grid drop, dropping him down to P11, where Russell will now start P10 with a fresh choice of tyres. Tsunoda got that penalty for impeding Bottas on his Q3 run. Bottas equally himself has a 3-place grid drop due to dangerous driving in the pit lane. And then with that, we take a look at the Q3 results, and it is back-to-back pole positions for Red Bull and Max Verstappen. The first time that has happened since 2013. It is Valtteri Bottas who actually put his Mercedes P2, but he will now start P5, shuffling Hamilton, Norris and Perez up 1 position each. Then it is Gasly, Leclerc, Tsunoda P8, Alonso P9 and Stroll P10. But now plotting each of these lap times for each of the sessions onto a graph, we can take a look at the overall driver progression. And it looks much the same as the past couple have. We see that the Red Bulls are always consistently leading each of the overall sessions, and then there's just everybody else behind them. Occasionally we have some drivers that lose time from session to session and some that gain significantly more time than others, but overall it is a nice, gentle progression. And now taking each team's fastest time from session to session, we can then work out their improvement from session to session as well. And so from Q1 to Q2, the most improved time down at the bottom was Alpine. They gained 0.4 of a second from Q1 to Q2, with Mercedes and also Ferrari both gaining under a tenth. And then doing the same thing for Q2 to Q3, it was actually Mercedes and Red Bull who gained the most, and quite significantly so as well. Interestingly, last week, back in France, it was Red Bull who gained massively from Q2 to Q3, whereas this time it is now Mercedes who don't gain massively, but definitely gain the most. And then Aston Martin went backwards from their Q2 time to their Q3 time. And so with the data overview all done and dusted for qualifying, we'll now take a look at each of the teams. We are going in 2020 championship order, so we start with Mercedes and we'll be ending with Williams. Everything is timestamped in the description down below, so you can feel free to skip to whichever team you would like me to talk about. And like I said, we start with Mercedes, and very interestingly, it is Bottas who led every single session, with the biggest advantage being his Q1 advantage over Hamilton, which was just over a tenth of a second. Hamilton slowly closed that gap, with both drivers also following almost identical progressions. Very small gains from Q1 to Q2, and then both taking a significant gain from Q2 to Q3. So both drivers absolutely extracting absolutely everything they can from their car, with the head-to-head now being 5-3 overall in Lewis Hamilton's favour. And overall, this is genuinely a decent qualifying from Mercedes, albeit apart from Valtteri Bottas's 3-place grid drop, but that's just a little bit unfortunate. So then from Mercedes, we take a look at Red Bull and the pole sitters for the Styrian Grand Prix of 2021. And once again, it is Max Verstappen who is dominating Sergio Perez so far. In every single one of the races, he has at least been in front one time. This is just significant dominance over a teammate. However, I do have numerous videos out there saying it's not as significant dominance as the previous Red Bull teammates, but that is an entirely different can of worms. But interestingly, unlike the Mercedes trend, the gap increases as qualifying goes on. It was 1.5 tenths in Q1 and it ended at being just over 3 tenths, whereas Mercedes went from 1.5 tenths down to 0.5 tenth. So it's sort of a reverse trend overall. But not too bad of a qualifying at all for Red Bull, but especially given the fact that they do have the fastest car, I would have at least expected Perez to out-qualify the McLaren of Lando Norris. And if we do take a look at the McLaren team now, little bit disappointing for Daniel Ricciardo being knocked out once again in Q2. And with a consistent gap of half a second to Lando Norris in both Q1 and Q2, there is definitely much more pace for the Australian to find. He's just got to find it from somewhere. Now, whether Lando Norris can actually secure himself a podium on pace come tomorrow, I'm not 100% sure, because the Red Bull definitely has better pace and we've got Bottas behind as well. So maybe McLaren are hoping for a best of P5, but I would love to see it. I would love to see them actually challenge and perhaps take it to the Mercedes and the Red Bulls. Maybe not the top two at front, because I feel that Hamilton and Verstappen are just going to disappear off into the distance, but perhaps they can hold back Perez and Bottas just a little bit. Maybe for 5 or 6 laps, we just want to see something interesting. Then from McLaren, we will take a look at Aston Martin, and I don't really know what to think about Aston Martin. Vettel seems to be on this really good trend the past couple of races, and now Stroll has suddenly hit back, and Stroll is now the faster of the two Aston Martin cars by 2 tenths. That is some significant margin. That's quite large, especially to overturn an almost 2-tenth deficit that he had in the previous races to Sebastian Vettel. But it's not all doom and gloom for the green team, as they do have a decent amount of race pace with them, so perhaps a double points finish is on the cards and the aim for Aston Martin. Then from Aston Martin, we'll take a look at Alpine. And again, a tale of two halves. One car is working, the other is not, much like it was last weekend as well. Ocon just struggling a lot, and then Alonso nailing it and getting all the way through to Q3. Yes, he didn't quite have the pace in qualifying as the Alfa Tauris that are both ahead of him, as well as a Ferrari, I believe, and the McLaren as well, but definitely an enormous step forward for Fernando Alonso. However, if the weather forecast holds true and there is actually rain that drops tomorrow, you better put a bet on Esteban Ocon actually climbing up that order. He is one of the most underrated wet weather racers on the current grid. Then from Alpine, we take a look at the Scarlet Ferrari teams, and again, it is a flip of what we saw last week. Last week, we saw Sainz out-qualify Leclerc in every single session, and now we see Sainz struggling. He's over a 10th down in both sessions, and he doesn't even make it through to Q3 either. However, the Ferrari does seem to have some decent race pace on its medium compound of tyres, so we'll have to wait and see what Sunday holds. However, if it is the rain, you can also bet that Leclerc is going to push himself even further up that order. Then from Ferrari, we take a look at Alfa Tauri, and one of my teams, if not the team of qualifying both drivers through to Q3, and Tsunoda finally actually putting in some decent performances against Pierre Gasly, faster in Q1 and then 0.2 down in both Q2 and in Q3. So not bad at all. I just hope that the Alfa Tauris actually have a significant amount of race pace and can challenge the cars around them, the McLarens, the Ferraris, the Aston Martins, the Alpines. I'd like them to score some decent points. And especially for Yuki Tsunoda's sake as well. But then from Alfa Tauri, we take a look at the second Alfa team, and that is Alfa Romeo. And I'm not quite sure what's up with Kimi Räikkönen. He just doesn't seem to be performing the past couple of races. There is quite a significant pace gap now that is forming between Giovinazzi and Räikkönen. Currently, it is 0.3 as of the Styrian Grand Prix, and over the course of the past 7 or 8 races, however many we've had before Styria, the gap in Q1 in favour of Giovinazzi has been 0.4. So it's hovering around this sort of gap, and that is very, very significant, something that Räikkönen should aim to rectify. However, I just don't think he really cares at this moment in time. Then from Alfa Romeo, we will take a look at Haas, and as always, it is just very bland looking at Haas. They were 0.6 of a second off of the pace of the next closest non-Haas car. That is just absolutely ridiculous. And then equally, Mazepin is much closer to Mick Schumacher overall. Just 1.5 was the difference in Q1, whereas the season's average so far in Q1 has been half a second. So he has definitely significantly closed down that gap. He just needs to overturn it and perhaps put in a few races where he is quicker than Mick Schumacher. However, I can't quite picture that happening just yet. Maybe if he consistently gets to just over a 10th down from Mick in the next couple of races, perhaps it might just happen. But this could just be a one-off sort of fluke, and then we do see the trend shift back towards the sort of half a second region. And then finally, for the qualifying edition of the race weekend data analysis for the Styrian Grand Prix, we will take a look at Williams, and gutting for George Russell to be just 0.008 of a second off of Q3 on pace in a qualifying that was overall pretty boring. Absolutely nothing happened. No yellow flags, obviously there's not going to be any safety cars, it's qualifying, but no red flags, no incidents, no unexpected results. And he was 0.008 off of Q3. And come tomorrow, he will actually start in the top 10. Now, unfortunately for Nicholas Latifi, that just over a 10th gap to George Russell was enough to get him bumped out of Q1. However, much like the story of the two Haas cars, that is significantly down on the season's average so far in Q1 in George Russell's favour, and that is 0.4 of a second, whereas the gap in Styria was 0.1 of a second, so it has come down, much like it has for Haas. And there we go, there is the qualifying data all wrapped up for the Styrian Grand Prix. Please let me know in the comments below what you thought of today's video and what you also thought of the qualifying. And finally, where you placed in the audience prediction championships for the Styrian Grand Prix. But that is all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next episode with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.